Thank you all for joining us today, and welcome to Leveraging Digital Financial Services to Advance Universal Health Coverage. Please note that this webinar is being recorded. My name is Kayla Thompson, and I will be IT support for this event. Before we begin, I would like to review a couple of tech items with you all. First, we recommend using computer audio for the best experience. If you would prefer to use your mobile device for audio, we recommend the Call Me feature. You will then be prompted to enter your phone number, and WebEx will call your phone at no cost to you. If you would like to change your audio connection to one of the other two listed on the screen, you are welcome to do so at any time during the webinar by clicking the arrow next to the audio button at the bottom of your screen. Finally, we welcome your questions during this event. To ask questions, you can do so by using the chat and typing your questions into the chat bar. To ensure that the panelists will be able to see your question, please be sure that the drop-down in the chat bar is set to everyone. If you need technical assistance during the webinar, you're welcome to chat me directly by selecting the chat button and then selecting my name, Kayla Thompson, in the drop-down menu. That does it for my tech notes. It is now my pleasure to pass it to Sherry Hawes, who will be our moderator for this event.
Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I am Sherry Haas. I'm a Senior Digital Health Systems Advisor in the Global Health Bureau Office of Health Systems at USAID. So thank you for joining us this morning, and thank you to the Local Health System Sustainability Project for hosting this webinar. LHSS is USAID's flagship initiative in integrated health system strengthening. Its goal is to help countries achieve sustainable, self-financed health systems that offer quality healthcare for all. And you can learn more about the project at lhssproject.org. Just quickly, our objectives during this webinar are to discuss the interest in establishing an evidence base for digital financial services for health, to share the findings and recommendations from both the Global Evidence Review and the programmatic case studies, findings and recommendations. And Kayla, I just want to note that we have a chat that some colleagues are getting error messages. So hopefully we can get that figured out quickly, and then we'll go into discussion and participant questions. So USAID has published a number of recent documents over the past year concerning the use of digital technologies, including USAID's digital strategy and the USAID vision for action in digital health. Also within the USAID Vision for Health System Strengthening 2030, which was released this spring, it details the important role that health system digitization can play in working towards health equity, quality, and resource optimization. So together, these documents lay out a plan for how the agency can increase the responsible use of digital technologies to accelerate digital programming in the health sector in order to more strategically partner with low and middle income countries to achieve their health outcome goals. So before I hand it over to our speakers, I just wanted to cover really quickly, what do we mean when we're referring to digital financial services for health and in advancement of UHC? So DFS are financial transactions, including payments, savings, loans, credit, insurance, remittances, and transfers that are made through digital channels. And that can include mobile phones, USSD, electronic cards, computers, and other electronic instruments in a health systems context. With the increased accessibility and affordability of mobile phones, of network service, and increased growth in innovations in financial technology, DFS for Health have the potential to contribute to countries' goals in advancing the three dimensions of universal health coverage. That is, who is covered, what services are covered, and how much are covered. So a little background on the origin of these two case studies. So in 2019, USAID published the role of digital financial services in accelerating USAID's health goals, which I also encourage you to see, as well as the digital visions and strategy. USAID's Office of Health Systems commissioned these reports, which will now be presented, on the role of DFS in the context of efforts to advance financial protection and support improved health system performance, and to better understand the factors that make these solutions successful. So I'd like to thank the presenters who you'll now hear from on these studies, as well as the projects and organizations which have led this important work. Those include the LHSS project, Digital Square, and colleagues from Management Sciences for Health, Farm Access, and the Rwanda Social Security Board. I also want to thank Amani Mbali, who initiated some of this work while she was at USAID's Office of Health Systems. And also note as well, joining on the line, in addition to the panel, is Farm Access Kenya Country Director Isaiah Okoth, who will be available during the Q&A session as well. So I want to hand over now to Emily Mangoni from Apt Associates, who will be discussing the results and recommendations from the Digital Financial Services for Health, a Global Evidence Review. Emily, over to you.
Thanks, Sherry. Great. Thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Emily Mangoni. I'm the Senior Technical Advisor for Digital Health and Transformation for the LHSS LHSS project. I'm going to jump right into our work here. So last year, USAID commissioned LHSS to establish an evidence base of the enabling factors and outcomes of emerging models of digital financial services in the health sector. We published this report earlier this year, and today I'm going to share brief highlights from this report, and I hope that you'll access it later. 4 research questions motivated our report. The first question was, do digital financial services, or DFS, increased financial protection, and these are all in low resource settings. Our second question was, do DFS increase demand for utilization of health services? Third question was, do DFS impact health system performance? And finally, fourth question was, what factors contribute to the success or failure of the implementation of DFS in these settings? We used 2 complementary methodological approaches. The first was a systematic literature review where we looked at about 1,000 documents from 12 sources in both the peer-reviewed and gray literature. Ultimately, we included 34 documents. And then we complemented this with key informant interviews. These were 36 key informants from 26 organizations at the intersection of digital technology, financial services, and health. And I'm going to jump right into our results. So our first research question was, do DFS increase financial protection? And we found several studies that demonstrated that yes, mobile money accounts smooth health and non-health expenditures. For example, mobile money users are less likely to forego essential goods and services like education and food. Mobile money users also, interestingly, spend more per capita on healthcare. We also found that digital loans smooth health and non-health expenditures for those populations that don't have access to alternative formal and informal health financing options. We also found that digital platforms really facilitate the scale of and participation in national health insurance. So for example, Ghana as a prime example, when they digitized their renewal process, they really had a large increase in participation and renewal. So that was a really sort of exciting finding and important piece. We also did see that digital platforms were key to scaling private health insurance, but really the financial protection piece is less clear. So more evidence is needed there. Next, we also looked at whether DFS facilitated health savings for health emergencies, and we found that yes, it does. And interestingly, it was particularly true among female, rural, and less educated mobile money users. One gap that we actually found across this question, though, was whether digital health insurance and digital savings accounts decrease out-of-pocket spending and really protect households from poverty. Our next question was, do DFS increase demand for or utilization of healthcare in low-resource settings? So if we see increased financial protection, perhaps we see corresponding increase in that utilization. And we did. We saw mobile money and conditional cash transfers both facilitated healthcare use in low-resource settings. So users of mobile money use more healthcare services compared to non-users. And interestingly, this is actually true even when both are insured. And we also saw that digital conditional cash transfers do facilitate healthcare use at scale. Great examples for that, of course, are in South American countries where there's a lot of national programs. We also saw that mobile health wallets facilitate health service use, but felt that more evidence was needed. We found that pairing insurance and telemedicine increased healthcare engagement and perceived tangible value. So telemedicine is actually a service that can be offered at fairly low cost to health insurance companies. But for populations that are just starting to understand the value of health insurance, this really makes it a tangible service that they can access immediately, whereas many don't understand why they'd be paying into a service that they wouldn't be able to access. So that was an important finding. We also found that access to digital credit decreased the likelihood that households will forego health services due to a health shock. One gap that we found, again, across this whole question was whether individuals with digital health insurance and digital savings use more services than those without DFS. So it's still some evidence needed. Our third research question was whether DFS impacts health system performance, and that was a pretty resounding yes. So we looked at different health system DFS payments, so payments for health workers, health facility accounting and financial management systems, health insurance enrollment, renewal, and payment, and digitizing these processes and services really increased the transparency. So where does the money go? Accountability, so who has the money? The speed of transactions, so health workers are getting paid more quickly and are more satisfied. It is a more efficient way to transmit money and certainly safer. It can increase revenue at the health facility level. And there's just improved provider satisfaction. And occasionally, because of that transparency, also better protocol adherence. So next we looked at what are the barriers and enablers to DFS in health, and we looked at sort of 4 areas. The first was political and regulatory environments. And so we found that clear regulations on digital banking and mobile money and insurance really protect those customers and create opportunities for new products. So insurers and other fintech companies really said that clear regulations help them build better products and prevented more fraudulent products from entering the market, increased consumer trust. So that was a really important foundational component for DFS. We also saw that a political mandate can really expedite DFS implementation. We saw this in India and the Philippines as examples where political leaders said we're going to be using digital in the health sector, and that's how it was. The second one was some digital infrastructure and ecosystem. So we really did still see that digital infrastructure can be a barrier to the equitable uptake of DFS in health. Who has access to phones there's still a sort of a digital divide there. Rural and urban, male and female, other demographics have differential access to technology and these services, so that can sort of increase that discrepancy. We also heard that interoperability and digital payment ecosystems are also key to expanding DFS. So for example, if you pay health workers through mobile money, and then they have to immediately cash out, they're less likely to want to be paid in mobile money, whereas if they can pay their utilities, their bills, their restaurant services, et cetera, through mobile money, then that ecosystem really encourages use. For health system maturity and facility readiness, we saw that digitization of parallel and upstream systems facilitate DFS implementation. So, for example, we heard that digitizing the HMIS or the claims processes or other financial accounting systems at the facility level or the local or national level really encouraged facilities to also introduce digital financial services, so accept mobile money payments. So this is really important, so that if you can do it sort of holistically, it's more effective. For example, the claims process, really digitizing the claims process incentivizes digitization because then those claims are processed more quickly. And finally, financial infrastructure and culture. One interesting finding was just that labeled accounts and transaction fees really deter social appropriation. So for example, friends and family borrowing. And improve self-control. So those are sort of functions of many of the digital financial accounts that actually improved people sort of maintaining their financial buckets and not having to share quite so much. But we did see that consumer understanding of the value of financial protection products is still low. So that was a bit of a barrier as well. So jumping into key takeaways. Of course, DFS in health are nascent, but gaining momentum. So really what we found was most products have only begun in the last 5 years. Most evidence is from Kenya. Half of our documents, for example, were about mobile money DFS in Kenya. And almost all of our documents were published in 2015 or later. So there's also sort of an absence of rigorous large-scale studies on more sophisticated DFS products. But we are seeing an increased interest in DFS in health, as evidenced by this presentation and all of the upcoming publications. We also saw that, I think what we wanted to reiterate is that we saw a lot of evidence on mobile money specifically, but it's not necessarily financial protection. It's a great way to aggregate resources for health and other essential services. But actually those who are using mobile money often pay more out of pocket. And so we do want to, note that there should be more of a large-scale shift towards prepayment and pooling options, which are better financial protection options than just paying out of pocket. So we wanted to make that distinction between mobile money and financial protection. We also wanted to note that while we did see some sort of exciting findings about women accessing digital financial services and sort of other vulnerable populations, DFS do not yet fully bridge that digital divide. And so it's important for donors and programs to really look at sort of complementary approaches to make sure that you're not exacerbating inequities and that you're truly reaching those most vulnerable populations. Finally, the global pandemic is really creating momentum for partnership for DFS and health. FinTech stakeholders are really excited about this. The whole world is focused at the intersection of sort of virtual to digital technologies and health. And so there's a big need for digital solutions, digital financial services in health. And telemedicine too is emerging as an important mechanism that will demonstrate value for digital enrollment and payments at low cost. So I think this is an exciting time to be at the intersection of digital financial services in health. And I do want to say that this was just a very high-level overview. The full report is available at lhssproject.org, and I hope you'll take the time to read it. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. So just, I see we've got a couple questions, and just to remind everyone to please go ahead and find the chat option down in your bottom right corner and enter questions as we go in the chat box, and we will get to as many of those as we can during the Q&A at the end. So next I would like to introduce Randy Wilson, who is the Data Analytics and Digital Health Practice Lead at Management Sciences for Health. Over to you, Randy.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And I want to acknowledge also how nicely you set the plate for this study, as you were with MSH at the time and was the PI. You were the PI, so it's been a pleasure to take this over and get it finished for us. So I'd like to talk about some case studies that we did. The idea of this is different from the previous study, which looked through a systematic review process at DFS for health. This was an opportunity to kind of drill down and try to understand a little bit more about specific country case studies and how programmatically they adapted, they were designed, challenges they met. I'd like to just introduce my panel. I've got two other presenters with me, Regis Hitimana, who's the Deputy Director General of Benefits with the Rwanda Social Security Board. That's the organization that manages the community-based health insurance program in Rwanda. And from Kenya, we've got Alice Machichi, who's a Senior Project Manager with Farm Access Foundation in Kenya. So I'm going to just speak a little bit to the objectives. This was a programmatic case study that we did, which looked at the following research questions. First of all, what was the experience during the implementation of the program? So barriers and facilitators, how the programs adapted. This study actually started before the pandemic and then was somewhat slowed down because we needed to have a lot of field data collection by the pandemic. So it was a nice opportunity in a way for a natural experiment to look at pandemic related changes. We were also looking at the question about how the programs were perceived to influence health system performance, and also looked at from the client and the beneficiary's perspective. In terms of the methods, like the previous study, we relied a lot on key informant interviews, and we had teams collecting data in both Rwanda and Kenya. In both cases, we waited out a little bit the worst of the pandemic so that folks could actually work with beneficiaries in person. In addition, we did a review of different secondary data, which we looked at trends in enrollment, service utilization, etc. So now I'd like to pass this on to Regis Hitimana. Regis, if you will.
Thank you very much, Randy. Thank you, participants, for joining us. I'm going to take you through some of the findings from the Rwandan case study. As Randy said, the Rwanda Social Security Board that I'm representing here is managing the community-based health insurance. This is a program that is targeting mainly people from the informal sector, and that was launched almost 20 years ago. That started as a pilot, and we started seeing a very high uptake of the program when it was rolled out nationally since 2005. And the enrollment has been stable over time. Initially, it started with the same contribution for every household member. But in 2011, the contributions have been revised to have 3 types of contribution depending on household economic situation. And in 2015, the management of the community-based health insurance was transitioned to RSSB to start managing it. And it was in 2018 when mobile payments were introduced together with the system that was called 3MS, Mutual Membership Management System. So since 2005, the enrollment has been stable between 75 and 90. I want to mention that we changed the way of reporting from the people from the household registry to population projection, because we realized that in 2017, we realized that some households were not registered in the database. So the enrollment you see here can be even higher if we go back to the old way of reporting. And before we introduced the 3MS, we had a number of challenges, mainly related to high volume of transactions that included very complex manual processes that involved going to the bank, paying for the family, and coming back to CBH to Mutual section, local office, to be able to renew your enrollment. And that was complicated by the fact that it happens at the same time. So regardless of when you enrolled, your subscription will end with the 30th of June. So between June and July, we still have a lot of volumes, and the systems that were in place were not adequate to address the high volume of transactions that were happening at the same time. And this was causing delays, and sometimes delays to accessing services. Next. Then the CBHI RSSB established the Mutual 3MS, Mutual Membership Management System. And together with that reform, RSSB contracted two companies. One is Irembo, which is a digital solution that is managing government services, digitalizing government services. Another one is MobiCash, which is also a digital financial service solution. And for a member to start to review their enrollment, they have to have the head of household ID, and they have two options. First, if you want to use MobiCash, you can go to the local bank, local saving and credit cooperative, local bank that are deployed in every corner of the country, where they will use a MobiCash application to be able to first check your premium balance, how much you have to pay as a household. Or you can also use a MobiCash agent. There is a network of agents deployed across the country. And they will do the same with the same application, be able to declare, to help you and know how much you have to pay. Alternatively, you can go through Irembo with your own phone or computer, or you can go through Irembo agents. There is a network of Irembo agents across the country that are helping citizens with another number of government services. So how the system knows how much to pay, our 3MS will go to Ubudehe database, which is like a household registry that has all the members of the household and which category that household belongs. So we have four categories and three types of premium for having category 1 with its own premium, category 2 and 3 with its own their own premium, and category 4. So the system will be able to know how many members of the household and which category, and apply the appropriate premium. And when the system gets that information, it sends back either to MobiCash, depending on who has requested that information, and or to Irembo. Then people can continue with the payment using a mobile money application, or using computer, using credit cards, or using the bank, the SACCO. Then the money will come to RSSB system, 3MS, and the system will update your status. And this is the same information that we use to monitor coverage, be able to produce daily and weekly reports. It is also the same information that when a member goes to the facility, they can easily, the facility can use their phones, the phone or computer to check the status, the enrollment status, and be able to access the service. Some of the facilitators of success, I'll recite a few. First of all, this is in line with the government digital vision or strategy. Have zero paper and zero trips. Both public and private services are being digitalized to reduce movements and papers, and digital financial services are well in line with this strategy. That's why it has received a lot of support and a good environment for it. Secondly, there is an existing mobile network and networks and private sector mobile money schemes together with the existing mobile money agents. If you can't use it yourself, you will find an agent to help you. And these are deployed in all the corners of the country. To cite few barriers to success, one is, as I said, the bulk transactions that have to happen at the same time. Sometimes the systems were not ready, the infrastructure was not ready to handle those services, and in some cases, some poor internet connectivity in remote areas. A second barrier was the digital literacy, where some citizens still prefer the banking system as a reliable source of a reliable service provider, although they have an option to use their own phones at their homes. So how has this contributed to service utilization and financial protection? We have seen an increasing utilization of services as mutual enrollment was growing over time. And we have seen in the last 10 years, utilization doubling from 0.7 to 1.5, way above the WHO recommended 1, which means every citizen at least to use the service once a year. And it's not only the digital financial services that is contributing to this, but it has played a role in making people finish their payment on time and be able to start accessing services on time. And a number of other effects are related to how it is convenient and easy even to pay for someone else, for the small and medium enterprises to pay for their staff, for household member to pay remotely without necessarily going through lengthy processes, and helping people access services. Next. With regards to contribution of digital financial services to health system performance and quality, I will cite a few that came out of a few elements that came out of this case study. One, obviously, it reduced a number of paper records that, of course, and the high risk of fraud that were involved and wrong data that were involved with the papers. But also it has improved the patient flow, because before this, people would go to the facility and first queue at the CBHI office to check their status. Now only the provider can check very easily with the phone or computer and facilitate access to services. Secondly, we have good, reliable data, and every member that comes to our system is related to a confirmed payment, and this is the data that we are communicating and checking where it is low to be able to address the challenges that we see. On the quality of services, as I said, checking enrollment status to be able to access services has been very simplified, and we are no longer, as the insurance manager, doing this. We have handed this assignment back to the service providers who are good, the ones to know whether to do the medical triage, to know who needs the services first, and be able to serve them faster. And the enrollment process has been very easy. We used to have the gap between enrollment because a lot of people could not complete the payment on the same day. But with this convenience, we can see people can do it with no travel and without any waiting. Thank you very much. I will
Thank
hand
you
over
so much,
to
Regis. So now, without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to Alice to discuss the Kenya Farm Access Program. Alice?
Thank you very much, Randy, and a big welcome to all the participants. I will share the case study from what we've been implementing as Farm Access, also collaborating with other partners in Kenya. And some of the lessons that we've learned from the implementation of this program have been instrumental in bringing on board clear and articulate lessons that have been very instrumental in the scale up of UHC that is underway in the country. So when we started the program, of course, we saw an environment where there was low health insurance penetration, which of course resulted in quite some high out-of-pocket costs. And of course, looking at specifically looking at households in low-income areas or low-income areas where we had women of reproductive age and their dependents who are really very vulnerable because they were forced to access care in a fee-for-service kind of environment because they did not have access to insurance. For these women, even the health facilities that they would visit within their localities, in most cases, you'd find that they're private facilities because in Kenya, we have about a 50-50 splits between the public and private healthcare system. And within the private healthcare system, the individual investors do have a limitation in terms of access to financing for operational costs as well as procurement of equipment to support, the provision of quality healthcare. So this is the environment with which we started in. As we started implementing the program, we made use of the CarePay MTBA platform, which is a platform that supports payment for healthcare. It's embedded in the M-Pesa system. And one of the things that this platform contained is a health wallet that was restricted for payments within the for health payments. And with this wallet, this is where the women who are benefiting from the program would get subsidies, insurance subsidies, as well as be able to put in their own contributions or savings or co-payments towards the health insurance in small incremental amounts, so that then they would be able to make to meet the required payments to access health insurance services. During also the implementation of the program, one of the things we managed to do is digitize the NHIF enrollment process, because NHIF is the National Social Insurance Scheme. And before we started this, the enrollment process was manual. You needed to visit the offices, you needed to walk to the NHIF offices and make a number of trips, providing different sets of documents. But during the program, we managed to digitize this process and just put it on a basic smartphone that was able to collect the photos, collect the relevant documents that are needed. And this is because of the interoperability of the MTBA system and the NHIF system that were connected to really make the health insurance benefit accessible to all households. On the supply side, with the facilities and the challenges that they were experiencing on the financing front, we saw that when the households and the women and their households would access healthcare in the facilities were able to digitize the claims data. And from this digitization, we saw a lot of data and evidence and transaction history that allowed the facilities to now even be able to access digital loans. So from the same system and through the Medical Credit Fund, which is a program under Farm Access, we were able to roll out cash advances, which are small loans for clinics to be able to handle some of the gaps in operations, as well as mobile asset financing for the clinics to be able to access relevant equipment to support advancements in quality of healthcare. Another thing that we also managed to do was improve or support facilities in seeing the gaps in quality, in the quality of care that they were providing. And this we did through the Safe Care, which is also another program that we implement within Farm Access, where we had digital tools that were rolled out within the participating health facilities. And these facilities were able to see what are the gaps that they have in terms of the quality and how can they address these gaps. And for some of those gaps, it required just an improvement in processes, but there was a clear linkage for gaps that really required financing, because then the facilities would be able to access the cash advance and the mobile asset financing to close the gaps that they had on healthcare implementation. From the findings in this program, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these findings and a lot of the lessons that we've learned have really brought on board key lessons, even in the implementation of UHC in the country. One of them is that with the digital tools that we developed, we managed to put them in the hands of CHWs and CHVs. These are community resource people that you find, at every village corner. And with these tools, it enabled that the health insurance benefit was no longer domiciled in the health insurance office. It was brought closer to the people, and we managed to also bridge the digital literacy divide from the CHVs, as well as using the CHVs to also educate the households. I think the other notable facilitator of success is that while there were different solutions existing within some state and non-state actors, we managed to look at how can we make these solutions and collaborate with other partners to improve and provide a seamless process. So these partnerships and collaborations were very key in improving and providing the solutions that we needed to implement the program and provide access to the households and to the individuals that we sought to support. Some of the barriers that we saw to success is that while we implemented the program in 2018, 2019, a lot of the households were also heavily affected during the COVID-19 period, and we saw a dip in liquidity, meaning they had a lot of demands for their resources, hence they could not even manage to be able to put some monies aside that could support their health insurance premium payments. And of course, this was of course a key lesson, because a lot of the households, yes, they were vulnerable, and one of the mitigations that we did there is that we wanted to now properly segment the population using social economic mapping tools to really understand who are the very vulnerable households that would benefit even from social protection safety net programs. Then it would cushion them during such sensitive periods like the COVID-19 period. When we look at some of the findings that we saw, is that definitely on the access side, we saw an increase in NHIF coverage, because during the program, we covered over 35,000 households who had never ever had access to health insurance. Of course, thanks to of course, with the shocks that they experienced during the COVID period, we saw that a few of only about 12% were able to move into the second year of the program, where they were required to at least co-pay some proportion of the premium. But a lot of them have also been able to continue with the insurance that they got courtesy of the program. As I mentioned earlier, we also did the collection of data and using social economic mapping tools to segment the population and really identify poor households that would really benefit from certain subsidies, maybe from a health perspective or any other any other sector. And this, of course, really cushions the households in certain times, because there are quite some vulnerable households out there. So with these tools, we've seen that beyond the program, we've seen that we've managed to also work with other stakeholders to scale them up to reach over 4 million people just by using the same digital tools, even in the national rollout of UHC across the country. When we look at the lessons or findings from a service utilization perspective, for all the households that do get onto health insurance, they get the benefit of, health promotion and health prevention services because they are now covered by the Nhif social insurance. Looking at it from a health system perspective or within the supply side, we saw the use of digital data or evidence-based data to support decision making, because from all the processes at the household level, at the facility level, there was a wealth of data that was generated. And this data was very useful to both the Ministry of Health, both at the national level and in the counties, to support decisions in terms of how are they going to plan and purpose for health provision within their jurisdictions. For the health facilities, when we saw the use of the Safe Care digital tool and the checklist to really promote quality improvement, the financing from cash advance and the loans for medical equipment really came in place to really support bridging the funding gaps that they had, because especially during the COVID period, we saw a lot of delays in facilities getting the insurance reimbursements. And so these loans really came through for the facilities to be able to access and to provide services and support their operations during that particular period. At the same time, we also saw a lot of facilities grow in the scope of services that they were able to provide with the financing on the medical equipment, and also be able to respond positively and put in place certain measures during the COVID response period. And I think from my presentation, I would like to stop there as Randy continues with the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Alice. Very good. I can probably do this one quite quickly. I think from both countries, we obviously saw an impact of the pandemic. The loss of revenue was already discussed, but some of the features that really came to bear were the fact that with mobile money payments, people were able to make payments without handling cash, and then they were able to pay in installments to smooth out sort of the costs to the household budget where income and revenues were lower. I think what was particularly interesting in the Kenya example was this mobile cash advance, because for a period in the early days of the pandemic, population did whatever they could to avoid going to health facilities, yet particularly the private providers still had to make payroll. So the cash advances would allow them to bridge those periods and keep services going until they return to normal. The mobile asset financing, of course, was also used to buy ventilators, special equipment that was not used to the same extent pre-COVID, and hopefully contributed quite a bit to the response. I just wanted to summarize with the recommendations of the study. I did put a link to this study, the whole document, in the chat earlier. The recommendations kind of grouped under 4 headings. One is that when you're implementing these types of systems, it's really important to take a whole systems approach to look at the existing digital landscape and stakeholders, because this is a multi-sectoral activity. The Ministry of Health can't do this alone. NGOs can't do this alone, but as they come together, it works quite well. I think the example in Kenya, particularly of how they leveraged the community health workers to bring the registration process for NHIF to the doorstep in the communities, is a great example. In Rwanda, the fact that they have all these mobile money agents who can actually help the less digitally literate process their transaction. And that was really something that was built into the program. The second area that particularly came through in Kenya was the opportunity of getting all this transactional data that's generated either through the financial transactions processed as part of the billing system or in the case of Rwanda, the registration process was able to allow people to really manage their program better, and it really expanded the use of data in more ways than just the initial intended purpose. And finally, the important finding that DFS does help to expand financial protection, at least from the perspective of the beneficiaries and the program managers. The particular advantage, I think, in the case of Rwanda, was the possibility of other family members, relatives, for example, paying and registering people for their insurance premiums every year, rather than giving them cash and they were uncertain about how that money could be used. It became a very easy way for families to sort of support the less fortunate. And similarly, government would finance those who fell into the lowest economic bracket. And so they had actually real data in terms of names, locations, and so that it was very easy to make the case of who needed those subsidies. And finally, particularly through the experience of the COVID pandemic, the DFS systems seem to contribute to some resilience. The fact that without having to go to a bank, the health providers could get these mobile loans. That was something that helped to enhance the access to care and efficiency of care, and certainly quality of service delivery. So with that, I will hand it back to Sherry to moderate the panel for questions and answers.
Thank you so much. And I know we are running very close to time, so we'll try to address as many of the questions that the participants have been adding into the chat as we can. I am going to start really quickly with the first question from our colleague who is writing in from Myanmar, asking regarding examples of open source platforms for digital health, for learning in places where digital systems are not very advanced, as well as information regarding introducing digital financial systems and costs and expenses. So I would just like to suggest first to see the two reports which have been presented here, as they're able to go into much more detail than our presenters have been able to in the discussion today. I'd also suggest reviewing the Global Goods Guidebook, which is available on the Digital Square website, and I'll add that link in the chat as well. And that includes a number of examples of digital health open source global goods, which have been used in a variety of contexts. I'm going to ask this question to Alice. So we had a question that came in that's asking about, and as Emily mentioned in her presentation as well, that a lot of the evidence that is existing today has been from Kenya. So it's asking about, is Kenya is obviously a leader in this space. How replicable would this be to other countries? So Alice, do you want to say a little bit about that, and perhaps about what Farm Access is doing in terms of similar programming in other countries, just briefly? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, there could be the feeling that, Kenya has made some steps ahead of other countries, but I think it's also because of the growth in mobile money that started a while back, in Kenya with M-Pesa. For Farm Access, we've been working with some of these programs also in other countries. namely in Tanzania, in Nigeria, and really just using the platform that is MTIBA to see how can we support, how can we use DFS to support the healthcare space, and how can we really push the envelope just a bit more to really promote access to quality healthcare in whichever geography that we are working in. There are other, elements, like for instance, the quality implementation of the safe care standards that we work across other countries beyond, the countries in Africa. But then these are also arrangements and discussions that we work with depending on whichever partner that we are working with across the globe.
Thank you very much, Alice. Another question, and I'll pass this one over to Emily really quickly, is regarding experiences that you found that have been documented from Asia. And maybe you could also just mention a little bit as others, Emily, are thinking about this. What would you like to see, or what would be useful to see in terms of documentation of ongoing or future DFS for health programs?
Thanks. Yes, we did talk to a number of stakeholders in Asia, Southeast Asia. We talked to Access Health, MetLife Foundation, TZ International, Microinsure, PwC India. So I think there's a lot of interest in, in sort of health insurance, digital health insurance, microinsurance programs. I think there's been limited success in a lot of those cases. I think that's because that, the sort of the infrastructure and the culture is just not at a place yet where people. Somebody in the chat mentioned Pakistan, and how hard it is to get people to uptake insurance there, and it was both that person and the stakeholder was like, it's like the lowest uptake in Asia. It's really, really hard. So I think, and I think also with pooling, like mechanisms that require like pooling and sort of prepayment, those often require scale to succeed. So that can be a real challenge. So there are certainly a lot of initiatives. I think reaching scale has been challenging. I do recommend looking, at the report to see some of the case studies and the examples that we included. I don't want to go too much in depth there. So yeah, let me just stop there. I'm not sure if I fully answered all of your questions.
Sherry, maybe I have just a little bit to add to that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Things that was interesting in the two examples for the case studies was that we focused on the premium payment for insurance and the pooling, as Emily mentioned. There has been in a number of countries quite a bit of interest, even from the mobile money operators in the health savings account, which I think, at least from my perspective, is a little more regressive because it kind of locks people's money up and keeps it in the digital ecosystem, and they can only use it, or there are sort of penalties for using it for other purposes. So certainly the insurance, as Alice mentioned, really provides them with a much broader range of services in most cases, including preventive and promotional services, and the health savings account tend to be used primarily to cover the sort of curative care.
Randy and Emily, I don't know if it's gotten into the chat yet, but maybe we can also add the link to the LHSS report in there as well.
Yeah, it's in there.
Oh, perfect, great. So I know we are down to our last minute. There was a question regarding improving governance issues and complementary governance measures. I'd also suggest to that question, please see the USAID Vision for Action in Digital Health. Certainly one of the key learnings that we've had over this experience is the importance of local leadership and local governance for digital health and digital financial services for health. And that's very much called out in the vision for digital health. I know we have several other questions we didn't get to. But I just really want to thank our speakers and thank the organizations that have really led on this work. If we want to go ahead, Kayla, and slide over to the last slide. So as we said, the full global evidence review is available for download on the LHSS website. The programmatic case studies report is available on the Digital Square project site. We've recorded this webinar, and that's going to be available in a couple of days. You'll receive a link to the full recording as well as the slide deck so that you can go back and review and share with colleagues if you'd like who weren't able to make it today. You'll also be able to find it on the LHSS site. When we close shortly, you'll receive a request to provide feedback as well as any suggestions for future topics that you'd like featured by the LHSS webinar series. So please go ahead and also, look at the project LHSS and Digital Square social media and consider registering for next week's LHSS webinar on improving social health protection for vulnerable women in the Dominican Republic. So thank you all for joining, and this was a really excellent discussion. Please also, for anyone who didn't get your questions answered, if you'd like to follow up with me, I can see if we can route you to the right answers. Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.